Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Yes, it's just me. It's your host, Michael Clifford, aka Slim Cliffy. I think I'm not sure why I'm so fuzzy. Hopefully that's a little bit better. Um, honestly, Josh is away today. He has baby duty. He was supposed to have a babysitter for his baby boy, but that couldn't come through. So I am here today all by my lonesome. So if you guys please could show a little love with those likes and subscribes. Those things certainly help us out as we're trying to keep the show going, keep this going right through to the end of the season. We've certainly felt the love from everybody since we've gone to our new format. It's been about a month now. Certainly been a big help to keep us on the air, to keep these shows coming. Josh and I love doing this. If we didn't love it, we wouldn't be here. So, even if you don't subscribe to the website, we certainly hope that you do share this show, tell people that might be interested. It's just a couple guys talking hockey, mostly DFS. Sometimes we talk about other stuff. Maybe we shouldn't, but we do. But thanks again for showing us all the support over the last month. It has certainly meant a lot to us. We have 4 games on the docket here tonight. Before I get to those games, I just want to shout out B. Armstrong, 35, finished second in the $12 last night. Had a really good lineup. He had Toronto, and he had Warren Fogle and Leon Draisaitl, which absolutely smashed against Seattle. UC Saros in net, finished second. Lots of high scores across the board last night. Austin Matthews, he kind of did what he does. He had a 47-point night on DraftKings. David Pastrnak right behind him, 46.5 with the hat trick. TJ Oshie had a hat trick of his own. I think Victor Hedman had a 4-point game. Anthony Cirelli had a 3-point game. Owen Tippett certainly did the job for Philadelphia. So there are a lot of big totals last night. If you're in a multi-entry contest, you probably needed close to 200 points to really hit. So congrats to B. Armstrong, 35. Nice hit. Hopefully we can help people win a little bit more money here tonight. Before we get to the games, I'm going to drop the link in the chat. It's our affiliate link. If you click through that, you can go and subscribe for weekly or monthly NHL DFS. You can go subscribe for NFL. Playoffs are certainly in full swing. We're only halfway through the NBA season. So there's that. We'll talk about MMA and what Josh is doing over there a little bit later on the show as well. So lots of sports going on. If you do want to sign up, click through that link that I just dropped in the chat. Really would help us out a lot, and hopefully we can help you win some money along the way. And I see a $10 super chat from our boy Clayton. Thank you very much. Clayton says, thanks for the solo. You could have bailed. I mean, I could have, but I wouldn't. Like, if we say we have a show, like, we're going to do the show unless something really bad comes up. Like, there's that week where I lost power. There's that week where Josh and I were both pretty sick. Like, those things happen. But if one of us is available, one of us is going to do the show. So thanks a lot for the $10 super chat. Thanks for all your support, Clayton, whether through the show or in the Discord. Always nice to see a message from you. You've been very helpful, not only for to us, but for other people in the Discord as well. So let's get to these games. We have Detroit going into Carolina. We have Detroit with a 2.7 total. We have Carolina with a 3.8 total. Alex Lyon has already been confirmed for Detroit. He's been pretty good for the Red Wings. He's been a big reason why they've been able to hang around that wild card playoff spot, or at least in the chase. Nothing confirmed on the Carolina side, but I did see Walt Ruff. He does content for the Carolina Hurricanes on NHL.com. He said it looks like it's going to be Antti Raanta. Obviously, Raanta has not been very good this season. He ended up down in the AHL for it. He had a couple good starts when he came right back, and then got obliterated by the Kings over the weekend. So or was it Monday? I mean, all these days start to blend together after a while. So it looks like it's going to be Ronta against Lyon. Of course, Patrick Kane's still out for Detroit. I haven't seen any sort of line rushes for the Red Wings today. I don't imagine anything will change too much on the Detroit side. I imagine we're going to still see a top line of Larkin with Lucas Raymond and David Perron. I mean, the team has won 6 of 7, including 3 in a row, including against 3 playoff teams at that. So I don't imagine they're going to change anything up. So we're going to be looking at Larkin, Raymond, and Perron, Alex DeBrincat, Robbie Fabry, JT Compher, what the bottom 6 looks like. We'll get to that in a second, but probably Andrew Kopp and Michael Rasmussen with Kristen Fisher on the third line. Here's the thing about Detroit. They're not very good. I don't know what else to say. 2 reasons that they've been able to hang around the playoff spot. One, their power play has generally been good this season. Certainly they got off to a real hot start there in October, cooled off a little bit. But they've been getting goals through their power play. The other is obviously Alex Lyon. Like when you have a goalie with a save percentage over 920 in an era where goalies posting a 905 is above league average, you're going to win some hockey games. 5-on-5, this team just isn't very good. Look at the top line, Larkin, Raymond, Perron. They're up over 100 minutes together, 1.7 expected goals for per 60, 3.1 against. 2.8 actual goals for, 5.2 against. They're allowing quite a bit. That is on the goalies. The problem is that they're just not generating anything at 5-on-5. Like they're shooting 12.6% as a line at 5-on-5. That's well above the league average. I think the league average is closer to like 9%. These guys are at 12.6%, and they're only scoring 2.8 goals per 60 minutes. That's just not a lot of goal scoring for that high of a shooting percentage. And it just tells us that they're just not generating a lot. And when you're going into Carolina, obviously you're going to get that Jordan Staal, Jordan Martinook, Seth Jarvis line as a shutdown line. And that line has been tremendous defensively. 1.5 expected goals against, 2.2 actual goals against per 60 minutes. So that is a pretty brutal matchup for Detroit 1. Here's the thing, though, is that Dylan Larkin is kind of doing what Dylan Larkin does, and that's be a phenomenal NHL player. Lucas Raymond has some pretty good playmaking data to his name so far this season. He's not shooting the puck a lot, which is kind of a problem. He has 29 shots in his last 24 games or something like that. Like he's just not shooting the puck. And, on previous shows, I've talked about how David Perron is having a really, really tough season. Like everything for Perron is down across the board, whether you look at his playmaking data, his transition work in the defensive zone, like everything. Like he's on the top line because they're trying to get him going, and because they're winning games, they're not changing anything. The issue with Detroit's top line not really playing that well and being in a pretty tough matchup is they're not getting all that much ownership. Here's our top stacks tool. 2.8% ownership against a 7.3 top 2 stack percentage. That is not that much ownership on a slate like this. Our boss, Jake Harry, made a good point yesterday in our Discord that he focuses a lot more on projections than ownership when it comes to this. And I think on a short slate, that's a pretty smart approach to take. One of the reasons why Josh and I talk ownership quite a bit is because we usually do, yesterday was an 11-game slate. Tuesdays wasn't very big, but there have been a lot of like 12, 13, 14 game slates. And when you have, 20 to 26 teams playing, there are a lot of high scores that can happen, right? Like just look at last night. You had 3 different hat tricks. You had a half dozen players get over 30 points. And that's why, if you have the choice last night between a 5% Matthews and a 15% David Pasternak or whatever it was, obviously you want the 5% Matthews, but when you only have 4 games and you only have 8 teams on the slate, the chances of getting, 2, 3, 4 hat tricks are a lot lower. So I would focus more on the projections. And that's why Larkin, Raymond, and Perron coming in with almost no ownership. Okay, fine. If you're playing a lot of lineups, I think they're fine to play. You're really banking on Antti Raanta just kind of falling apart. And if you've been doing that for most of the season, it hasn't been a bad bet. But it's a little bit worrisome when you're relying on a goalie, having like an 850 save percentage or worse to get there for your DFS value, because it's going to be tough to generate a lot of shots. So, you're not going to get multiple guys on that line with the shot bonus on DraftKings or something like that. So I think I'm out on Detroit 1. Detroit 2 is a little bit more interesting to me. Robbie Fabry doesn't shoot much. He doesn't really move the needle for me a lot. But they are generating more expected goals. Like JT Compher and Alex DeBrincat, even without Patrick Kane, have been generating more expected goals than the Detroit top line. The actual goals are basically in line despite a lower shooting percentage. And once you get, past that Jordan Staal matchup for Carolina, there are matchups that can be had. Like the Carolina top line over their last 110 minutes together, 2.9 expected goals against. The Carolina third line, if you look at just Kotkaniemi and Michael Bunting, 3.1 expected goals against per 60 minutes. Like there are matchups where you can create offense. And if you're creating offense against Antti Raanta, you could have a good night. And there's no ownership on Detroit 2 either. That's kind of the point here. Alex DeBrincat, Robbie Fabry, JT Compher, 1% ownership, 4.1% top 2 stack. Yeah, they are expensive, but I also say, like, outside of Dylan Larkin, Alex DeBrincat is the team's best offensive player, at least the best one healthy right now. So I think if anything on the Detroit side, I would probably prefer Detroit 2 over Detroit 1. DeBrincat is 7,300, but Compher, he's only 4,100, and Compher's even on the getting some top power play time. It's weird that they don't have Alex DeBrincat on the top power play, but that's another discussion for another day. So I think Detroit 2 is kind of where I'm looking right now. On slates like this, sometimes you do want to dip down to a third or to a fourth line. I'm fine if you want to go to like Sprong and Veleno or, Kopp and Rasmussen. Kopp and Rasmussen actually have the same number of expected goals as the Detroit top line. So maybe, not a bad idea to, if you need to one off Michael Rasmussen or something. Like Rasmussen's on pace for like 20 goals. He's not a nothing player. So if you want to one off him or something like that, I think that's perfectly fine. But for a full stack, I think it's Detroit 2. On the Carolina side, this is a great matchup. It's a great matchup basically across the board for Carolina. There are no really defensive matchups that I'm super worried about. Like the JT Compher line is probably their best defensive line. Even they're only around league average. Detroit, above league average by time shorthanded per game over the last couple months. So they're taking more penalties than the league average. Carolina's drawing more power plays. Carolina power play has also been phenomenal. It's something we've talked about quite a bit on the show. Since Andrei Svechnikov back there, the shot attempts, the goals, they've just all gone way up. And the Detroit penalty kill has been pretty good over their last 4 or 5 weeks. For most of the season, it hasn't really been that elite. So you get Aho and Svechnikov on the top line and also on the top power play unit. They're coming in with quite a bit of ownership here tonight. Now, I just said that I don't worry that much about ownership. 17%, like honestly, 17% when you're at home against Detroit on a 4-game slate, I don't think it's that bad at all. Like I don't think it's something like worth avoiding. Here's my problem with Carolina is Svechnikov, like him and Aho went on a huge points bender. Like you can't take that away from them. And there were people in our chat and in our Discord who did well over those few weeks where they went on that bender. But Svechnikov isn't shooting the puck a lot. We brought that up on a show last week. Just over his last 12 games, he's around 13 shot attempts per 60 minutes. Like this is a guy who's often like at 20 plus. Like it's basically all season where he hasn't been generating a lot of shots. In fact, I looked for shot bonuses, DraftKings shot bonuses. Last year, Svechnikov averaged one roughly every 4.6 games. This year, it's one every 9.5. So literally twice as often last year compared to this year, he got the shot bonus. Like he's just not shooting a lot. And when you're talking about a line that isn't perfectly correlated, that's probably going to come in with a lot of ownership. Not shooting a lot is a little bit of a concern. Now, they are still the best offensive line from Carolina, so I have no problem at all using it. I just wonder if I'm not a little bit more interested as a filler line in that Jarvis Stahl Martinook line. Like I know playing Jordan Stahl is in DFS is kind of a no-go, but they're coming in over-owned, but 8.7% is not that bad. Seth Jarvis, there are a lot of nights where he leads this forward group in ice time. So Seth Jarvis, Jordan Martinook, 2-man, something like that. I think that's perfectly fine. Martinook, since Christmas, 1.2 expected goals per 60 minutes at 5-on-5 individually. Like, that's really, really high. That's easily a first line rate. And when you're going up against Detroit 1, again, 3.1 expected goals against per 60 minutes for that Detroit top line. They're pretty bad defensively. I think I kind of like that Jarvis Stahl Martinook line as a filler. You see Marty Necas is going to return for Carolina tonight. He's coming in on the fourth line. I think there's a reasonable chance they actually end up with more ice time than the Kotkaniemi line. So if you want a one-off, Necas, or pair him with Jack Drury, or pair him, I think especially with Stefan Nason as a 2-man, I think that's perfectly fine. But it is the Jarvis line that I like best from Carolina here. So Jarvis Stahl Martinook from Carolina, DeBrincat, Comfort, Fabry on the Detroit side. All right, just need a little bit of a drink of water here. Moving on, we have the Minnesota Wild with a 2.6 total going into Florida. Florida has a 3.4 total. Minnesota played last night. Minnesota got their brains beat in last night, 7-3 against Tampa Bay. Freddie Gaudreau was hurt in that game. Doesn't look like I wouldn't expect him to be in the lineup or here tonight. Phil Gustafson went last night, so it's going to be Marc-Andre Fleury tonight in net for the Wild. One of the big problems with Minnesota right now is they just don't have any defensemen they can rely on. Like, you have Brock Faber, Jonas Brodin returned. That's great. You have those two guys. There's no one else on that blue line that you can rely on. That injury to Jared Spurgeon is a pretty impactful one. You can't rely, like Jake Middleton, he's fine, but I think he's a guy on a good team, on a good defense group. He's probably the number 6 defenseman playing 15, 16 minutes a night, rather than skating on the top pair. Zach Bogosian, or top pair playing 19, 20 minutes a night. Zach Bogosian, like when he was in Tampa Bay 3-4 years ago on those cup teams, he was the guy that was, sometimes in number 6, sometimes in number 7, sometimes in the press box. Like, he's a guy that's basically being relied on for top 4 minutes. Like, they just don't have the defenseman that can help them out. If Faber and Brodin are off the ice, like, they can't move the puck, they can't defend. Like, those are big problems. Florida's having their injury issues of their own. Alexander Barkov still not ready to return. It looked like he was trending in that direction this morning, but Coach Paul Maurice came out and said that he's not going to play tonight. So I suspect they're going to be going back to that top line that they had in the last game with Eetu Luostarinen, Anton Lundell, and Sam Reinhart. Now, the one thing that we mentioned on yesterday's show about Minnesota is the power plays and the penalty kills. Minnesota is at 4.1 times shorthanded over the last 2 months. That is a lot. Amongst, obviously, and I'm still way out in front of everybody, but Minnesota is now taking the third most penalties per game over the last 2 months. Florida's second. Like, these are two teams that have been taking a lot of penalties. And on the flip side, they also draw a lot of power plays. Florida, 4.2 power play opportunities per game over the last 2 months. That's second in the league. Minnesota at 3.8 power play opportunities per game over the last 2 months. That's seventh. So these are two teams that draw and take a lot of penalties. So that kind of tells you which players that we should probably focus on here tonight. The issue with Minnesota, when looking at their 5-on-5 lines, I'll show you what we have in top stacks right now. Kaprizov, Zuccarello, Rossi, Eriksson Ek, Boldy, Johansson, Hartman, Gaudreau, Foligno, and then the fourth line. the problem with Minnesota is that they completely nuked their lines last night. I think, Eriksson and Boldy, they stayed together. Ryan Hartman finished the game. His last couple shifts were skating with Kirill Kaprizov. Gaudreau was part of that. Being down 3-4 goals is certainly part of that. This is not a very good Minnesota Wild roster. So when we talk about Minnesota, it's really hard to say exactly which players we'd want to stack for two reasons. One, Florida generally has a great penalty kill. So even if they take 4 penalties here in this game, they can easily just kill them off. And, Minnesota's power play has certainly been up and down this season. So it's not, even though Florida might give up a lot of penalties, I don't think it's necessary, a lot of power plays. I don't think it's necessarily a great power play spot for the Wild. And for that reason, I think at least right now, there's not a lot that's really attracting me to the Minnesota side. Now, there isn't very much ownership, 3.8% on if that Kaprizov top line stays together. But, as I said, Marco Rossi got moved down. There's not much on the second line either. Now, Barkov being out means that they're not going to use Sam Reinhart in a shutdown role. They're going to use the Matt Tkachuk line in a shutdown role. And that Matt Tkachuk line, which was struggling earlier this year, not only offensively, but defensively as well, has certainly turned it around. Their last 10 games, 2.2 expected goals against per 60 minutes, 2.3 actual goals against per 60 minutes. So you have Minnesota going up against a great penalty kill back-to-back on the road, and are probably going to face that Matt Tkachuk line, which has been tremendous defensively over their last 10 games. So I have no problem playing Minnesota because Kirill Kaprizov, playing their top guys anyways, their power play guys, because Kirill Kaprizov is good enough to break a slate by himself. Joel Eriksson even is good enough to break a slate by himself. Matt Boldy can also do it. So if I were to play Minnesota, I would certainly focus on those types of power play guys. This isn't the spot where I'm going to dig in for, my Marcus Foligno or Connor Dewar or anything like that. There are spots we just talked about in Carolina and Detroit where maybe there are some third liners that we could target as fillers. I don't think Minnesota is the team to do that. I think even though it's not a great power play spot, if they're going to put up a DFS winning score tonight, they probably have to get there on the power play. So I would focus on those power play guys, but it is not Minnesota I like in this game. It is Florida that I prefer. Florida's missing Barkov. So if you don't want to use Sam Reinhart, I think that's fine. But Reinhart's on a 6-game goal streak now. He had a hat trick 3 or 4 games ago. He's over a goal per game. Over the last month. This guy has just been on an absolute tear. I don't like his line mates. Anton Lundell was a player that I was high on. He's just not done anything since Mason, weirdly enough, since Mason Marchment left for Dallas. Lundell had a bad season last year, and he's not having a good season this year either. His scoring chance assists, which is tracked by a website called All Three Zones, or Patreon, sorry. His scoring chance assist, off the top of my head, is about 1.3 per 60 minutes at 5-on-5, and the league average for forwards is at about 3.1. So he's less than half the league average in scoring chance assists. So he's not playmaking, and he's not a big goal scorer either. So it's what would you say you do here? They're because Barkov is injured, and they want to use Rodriguez on the third line because he's a guy who, in a third line role, can kind of carry the line. So I see why they're doing that. They're basically putting Luosterainen and Lundell with Reinhart to hide them. You know what I mean? And Luosterainen is a player that I do like. He's not a high upside offensive player. I think he's a little bit more of a defensive / playmaker type. If you want to use 2-man of Luosterainen and Reinhart, I think that's perfectly fine. Minnesota does take a lot of penalties. Their penalty kill really does struggle. We talked about that on yesterday's show. Yesterday they go into Tampa Bay. They allow, I think it was 3 power play goals against Tampa Bay. This is a penalty kill that's really struggling. Pretty much has all season, old coach or new coach, Brodin in or out. It hasn't really mattered. It is a tremendous power play spot for Florida. there is a lot of ownership on the Florida top line. That's the one thing or it's not their top line. We have them listed as a second line, but it is their top line. Tkachuk, Verhaeghe, Bennett, perfectly correlated on the power play, looking upwards of 30% ownership on DraftKings here tonight. It's a lot. I think it's worth it. And I think you can just flat out power play stack Florida in this matchup. Like, this is, like I said, back-to-back on the road for the Wild. Florida has the third highest total on the slate, but, Carolina being first isn't that big of a deal. We'll talk about New Jersey next. They're in Columbus, and, everybody has a high total against Columbus. So that they only have the third highest total, I don't think is a big deal. I think it would even be higher if Barkov is in. But all that is to say, I think this is a tremendous power play spot for Florida. Brandon Montour has certainly come alive of late. He's shooting the puck a lot more. I think he's up to 16 shots in his last 5 games. He's been very involved offensively. Those points are going to come for him. So I'm perfectly fine just flat out power play stacking Florida. Just use the second line, throw in Reinhart and Montour, and then go fish for some depth, some cheap depth to fill out your DFS roster. I think that's perfectly fine in a matchup like this. Dipping down to the third line is where things, I think, kind of get interesting for me in this game, and it feels weird to say that, but Evan Rodriguez over his last 10 games is at 20 shot attempts per 60 minutes. Now, he's a guy that has trouble scoring. He typically has low shooting percentages season after season, and part of those 10 games also were skating on the top line with Barkov and Reinhart. So, being down on the third line with Kevin Stenlund and Ryan Lomberg, certainly not the same thing. Ryan Lomberg is an interesting player because it seems like if you watch any Florida game, he's like a Michael Grabner in a sense. He's like a dirty Michael Grabner for anybody that remembers the NHL from 10 years ago. Like, Michael Grabner would get one breakaway a game. He just wouldn't score on a lot of them. And Ryan Lomberg is kind of the same way, where I feel like he's on a breakaway or a 2-on-1 or a couple 2-on-1s every single game. Once in a while he pops them. He usually doesn't. If he was a higher skill guy, he would be playing higher in the lineup. That's just kind of the way that goes. But I feel like him and Rodriguez will be able to generate against, that Minnesota bottom six that's going to be out without Gaudreau. They're going to be on the ice without Faber and without Brodin for a fair chunk of it at 5-on-5. So I think Florida 3, at least some sort of 2, man. And if you want to just use Stenlund and Lomberg and leave Rodriguez off, I think that's fine. But I think this is a spot where you can go look for some cheaper players to try to fill out your rosters. But far and away, I like the Florida power play guys in this game. Power play, Florida 2, if you want to just use them, leave Reinhart off. That's, no arguments with that. Especially where you're going to be going up against Kaprizov, and Kaprizov's line, whomever centers him, typically has the worst defensive numbers. So, this Tkachuk line being in a shutdown matchup is actually beneficial to them. So I really do like Florida 2. I think I would turn it into a power play stack, but it is, again, the home side that I like best here in this game. Earlier in the show, I dropped the affiliate link to click through if you want to join up here at Stochastic, if you want to do weekly NHL, monthly NHL, NBA, MMA. There's a whole lot of goodness here at the site. Just click through the link that I shared in the YouTube chat. I believe the link is also in the description below this show. It helps us out. And we have a special little deal going on for you. Josh has been doing a little bit of MMA content for Stochastic. If you head on over to my Twitter, at Slim Cliffy on Twitter, I retweeted his video. He posted it on his own Twitter account. His is JRH002DFS. So you can just go straight to his Twitter account. But he has his MMA video up. I think it's for UFC 297. I'm going to be honest, I really don't follow MMA that closely, but I think it's 297. And there's a promo code that people can use to get through that affiliate link. It's 30% off MMA DFS. The promo code is 297. They just added MMA Sims. Anybody that's been using Sims for NFL knows how helpful that they can be. And there is now MMA sims up on Stochastic. So if you click through that affiliate link I just shared in the Discord, you can get 30% off the MMA DFS package by using the promo code 297. If you just want to sign up for NHL, you get the top stacks tools that I always talk about. You have the ownership here. If you want to look up individual players on both DraftKings and FanDuel, you have projections. You have the goalie stats to see projected saves, projected goals. You have the skater stats, how many minutes they're projected for, shots, all that stuff. There is a lot to help you out on the NHL sides of things as well. So click through that link if you're interested in signing up. If you just want the MMA, it's 30% off. And once again, that promo code is 297. All right, 2 more games to get through. The first one is the New Jersey Devils, 3.6 total going into Columbus. Columbus Blue Jackets have a 3.0 total. New Jersey, eventually there are just so many injuries that a team really has a tough time overcoming them. And, New Jersey's now lost 4 or 5 games without Jack Hughes in the lineup. They haven't really been scoring a ton. They haven't scored more than 4 goals in any one of those games. Going into Columbus is a little bit of a different beast. But you take out Jack Hughes, who's far and away their best offensive player. He's just one of the best offensive players in the league. You take out Dougie Hamilton, who's one of the best offensive defensemen in the league. Eventually, there just aren't enough guys to pick up the slack. But this is the Columbus Blue Jackets. No shade to Columbus. They're certainly not at the point that their general manager thought they would be at this point of their rebuild. But Columbus does get back Boone Jenner tonight. Now, they got back Sean Corrali a couple games ago. They get Boone Jenner back tonight. One thing Josh and I had talked about when Columbus has been on the shows that we've done recently is that Boone Jenner and Sean Corrali are probably the team's 2 best penalty killers up front. And Columbus's penalty kill took a big nosedive with those guys out of the lineup. Now they're both back. New Jersey has typically generated a lot of their DFS value through the power play, especially when Jack Hughes was healthy. This should be an improved Columbus penalty kill now that Boone Jenner is back in the lineup. Jenner slated to come in on this, what I guess you would call the second line with Jack Rozovic and Adam Fantilli. The coach is moving Adam Fantilli to the wing for some reason. Top line of Cole Sillinger, Johnny Gaudreau, and Yegor Chinnikov. That Sillinger, Gaudreau, Chinnikov line, I assume, is going to go out against Hischier, Bratt, and Toffoli, if those are indeed the lines for New Jersey here tonight. Thankfully, this is another one of the early games, so we'll see when warm-ups hit. I'm not expecting anything different. But again, New Jersey's lost 4 or 5. I wouldn't be surprised to see a few lineup changes. So I suspect that Sillinger, Gaudreau, Chinnikov line is going to go out against that Bratt, Hischier, and Toffoli line. Now, there's no Columbus line that should be good defensively. Like, Columbus has really struggled defensively. I will say they're not that bad offensively. Defensively, they're a disaster. Sillinger and Gaudreau are up to nearly 80 minutes together at 5-on-5, 3.3 expected goals against per 60 minutes, 3.2 actual goals against. Those are just terrible defensive numbers. That makes it a great matchup on the New Jersey side of things. Hischier, Bratt, Toffoli, 18,900 on DraftKings here tonight. They are also coming in with a lot of ownership, and that's kind of the problem that I have with playing them here tonight. I'm also playing single entry here. The issue that I have with playing them is that they're not that much cheaper than the Florida line we just talked about. They're $1,900 cheaper, and when you're on a slate this small, $1,900, you're just talking about moving from a $5,000 defenseman to a $3,000 defenseman. It honestly isn't that big of a deal. If they're going to come in at similar ownership rates, and that's what we have projected, I would probably rather just go with Florida because, like I said, New Jersey does draw a lot of its value from the power play, but without Jack Hughes there, you take by far the best dual threat offensive player that they have out of the lineup and off the power play. I don't think it would really surprise anybody to hear, but without Jack Hughes on the top power play unit, their shot attempts are down, and he missed some time, a game or two earlier in the season. So, it's not a huge sample yet. But without Jack Hughes, their shot attempts on the power play are down 35%. It is a massive, massive drop. So you have these guys who are really struggling to generate anything on the power play going into Columbus on the road against the Columbus team whose penalty kill should get better now that they have, Corral, as I said, Corral came back a few games ago and Boone Jenner back tonight. Like, that penalty kill should be a lot better. And that was one of the saving graces for Columbus through the first 2 months of the season or 7 weeks of the season was their penalty kill really wasn't that bad. Everything else was, but their penalty kill wasn't. So if I'm going to, play a line that could be 25, 30, 35% owned tonight, it's not going to be this New Jersey line. It would be that Florida line that we just talked about. Where things get a little bit more interesting is moving further down the New Jersey lineup, because there's a fair bit of ownership coming on the Meyer, Mercer, McLeod line, and I get it. $14K, not that expensive. Timo Meyer, certainly a brand name in the DFS game. A guy that typically puts up a lot of shots, good amount of goals, good amount of points, all that. He's certainly struggled a lot since he got to New Jersey. Now, I'm not a fan of Dawson Mercer. It seems like he has these 2 or 3 week stretches every season, maybe a couple times a season where he has a lot of points, and then in between he just does very, very little. One of the reasons for that, I was looking at some of the scoring chance data again that I referenced earlier. He's at 2.5 scoring chance assists per 60 minutes this season. That is easily that's about 20% lower than the league average. So easily a third line rate. That's not very good. You have Timo Meyer, who's struggling to score. Michael McLeod, who's, I think, an underrated player, a good player, but still not anything approaching a high-end offensive player. And then Dawson Mercer, whose playmaking skills are very suspect, coming in at nearly 20% owned. I think that's an easy fade for me. I would things are really getting tough here. I honestly would probably rather play the third line. Haula and Lazar, Eric Haula and Curtis Lazar, up to 120 minutes together, 2.3 expected goals, 1.7 expected goals against. So they're carrying the play when they're on the ice. They're up over 120 minutes together. That depth from Columbus, if the Jenner line is good defensively, I don't think they will be. If they're good defensively, Lazar and Haula won't see much of them. They're certainly not going to see much of the top line. Once you get to the Kent Johnson, Marchenko line, even if you get to, Tessier with Corrali and Danforth on the fourth line, those aren't matchups that I'm particularly concerned about. I think this is another spot where you can go grab your cheap players to put in more expensive stacks elsewhere. And I also want to highlight Alex Holtz. Why this guy doesn't get much ice time is beyond me, especially where New Jersey lost Hughes and lost Hamilton and are struggling to score. Alex Holtz got 8 minutes of ice time in his last game, put up 4 shots and a goal. Alex Holtz leads all New Jersey Devils players, all of them. Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt, Tyler Toffoli, Timo Meyer, Nick Hischier, all of them in points per minute at 5-on-5 this season. And he leads all rookies in that sense as well. This is a guy who has been generating good amounts of offense all season. He's a guy that, you don't want to necessarily use him because he's playing with Chris Tierney and Max Willman. But I think if you even want to dip down Alex Holtz, if there's any guy that can put up a goal in less than 10 minutes of ice time, it's certainly Holtz. So I think he's kind of in play. But I think of everything on the New Jersey side, it is that third line that I like best. Use them as a cheap filler. If you just want to one-off Eric Haula or something like that, because I'm not worried about the matchup against Columbus. There are expensive spots elsewhere that I'd rather play than this New Jersey top line. So I think it's Haula, Lazar, Bastian. Probably leave Bastian off, but I certainly wouldn't do anything more than a 2-man. But I think those guys are where I'm focusing on the New Jersey side. On the Columbus side, this is frustrating because Cole Sillinger, he's just not that good of a player. Like I honestly don't know what to say. I think he's, he had a hat trick a couple weeks ago. Like, nice, good for him. There's just not a whole lot that he brings to the game. He doesn't shoot a lot. He doesn't have good transition skills. He's not a great playmaker. They're leaving him with Gojo because they're trying to lengthen the lineup somewhat. I think all it's doing is just making everybody worse. Like, that's just kind of the way it is. And if you're going to go into that Hischier line, like, I suspect the Hischier-Bratt line is going to be easily New Jersey's best defensive line. Now, New Jersey's goaltending remains very suspect, so Columbus won, certainly in play. I just don't think that's the line that I would specifically focus on here. It's Jenner, Fantilli, and Rozovic that's interesting to me. Fantilli and Rozovic have been able to generate a good offensive amounts in a small sample. Rozovic and Jenner, 90 minutes together this season, 3.2 expected goals for, 70 shot attempts per 60 minutes at 5-on-5. Those are really, really good offensive numbers. And once you get past that Hischier matchup, like, there's not a lot that I'm worried about defensively. Like I said, Michael McLeod's a good defensive player. I don't think he has the wingers to support him defensively. And I'm not worried about the New Jersey second and third pairs. I'm not worried about the New Jersey goaltending or anything like that. And there's honestly not that much ownership on them here. 7.9% ownership, 14K line, where we're not looking at like an Austin Matthews $21,000 line. Florida 2 is certainly expensive, but we're not looking at, Edmonton 1 at 23,800 or Colorado 1 at 24,500. Like, that line can fit in with anybody here tonight. I like Jenner, Fantilli, and Rozovic on this side. Now, if you want to dip down to the third line, Marchenko and Voronkov actually have good numbers together when Chinnikov is elsewhere. That should probably highlight a little bit more how much I don't like that Columbus top line. I think Marchenko is their best goal scorer right now. He's a guy that's been incredibly impressive since he entered the league. He's even added some playmaking to his game. So if you want to use this third line instead of the New Jersey side, I think that's perfectly fine. But it is Columbus 2 that I like best on the Columbus side. I just don't, Sillinger, Gojo, and Chinnikov, they're perfectly correlated on the power play. That really doesn't do anything for me because I don't think Chinnikov is that good of a player, and I certainly don't believe that Sillinger is a good player at all. Obviously, everybody knows how much Johnny Gaudreau has struggled this year. So for me, I think it's Columbus 2, and then both third lines that I like best in this one. So certainly not looking at the expensive players. All right. Let's get to our final game here. We're going to be looking at the New York Islanders with a 3.3 total. They're going into Chicago. The Chicago Blackhawks have a 2.2 total. Now, Chicago played last night. Chicago lost last night. I don't think that should surprise anybody. Arvid Soderblom started for Chicago. Didn't play poorly, but, when your team doesn't score, just one goal is enough for a loss. So, I suspect Peter Mrazek is going to be starting here tonight. There was nothing weird, let's say, about the Chicago lines. They stuck with them all game, as they have been basically since Bedard got hurt. On the Islanders side, Pierre Engvall still missing from the lineup. That kind of hurts. He has some good playmaking numbers this year, and I'll get to that in a second. Bo Horvat, Anders Lee, looks like they're going to be back together here on the top line. The thing with the Islanders that always kind of bothers me is this team should be better offensive or better defensively than they are. They have really struggled on defense. So I don't want to say I like Chicago here tonight. Like, this is a team that has generally not been able to score at all, whether it's with Bedard or whether it's without Bedard. Like, this is a team that has really struggled to score. But in a very small sample, in a very recent sample, because it hasn't been long that Rem Pitlick, I almost said Remy, that Rem Pitlick's been on the top line.
2.8 expected goals per 60 minutes, 63 shot attempts for Pitlick and Radish on the ice together. Last night they skated, Radish skated nearly 20 minutes. He plays on the penalty kill, so that's part of it. Kurashev and Pitlick around 15 to 16. It's just they're going to be going into the second and third lines from the Islanders, and those second and third lines from the Islanders, like, they're just bad. Like, with Engvall or without Engvall, that second line has been giving up a lot defensively. Without him, they're at 3 expected goals against per 60 minutes, 73 shot attempts against per 60 minutes. That's really bad. The third line, as presently constituted, 75 shot attempts against per 60 minutes, at 5-on-5, 2.6 expected goals against. Pajot and Holmstrom just haven't been able to click here this season. So I don't want to say I like Chicago one here tonight. I think it's tough to say that you like Chicago on any given night. But where they're going to avoid that Islanders top line, which generally has been good defensively. Now, that has fallen off since Christmas, but has generally been fine defensively this season. Where they're going to go into those second and third lines from the Islanders, I don't hate the idea of, a two-man of like Radish and Pitlick, Kurashev and Radish, something like that. This is still a 2.2 total. It is by far the lowest total on the slate. I'm not running out to play Chicago Blackhawks. Like, I would rather play cheap Columbus. I would rather play cheap New Jersey. I would rather play even cheap, Carolina or what have you. I'm just saying I don't think the matchup is that bad for the top line going up against the second and third lines from the Islanders. And they have been generating decent amounts of offense. Now, generating and finishing are two different things, and they've had, this entire team's had problems with the latter. But generating is the first step to getting there. And when you only have so many teams on the slate, if you're playing a lot of lineups, you have to at least consider them. That Dickinson, Blackwell, Anderson line, really good defensively. Again, only one guy, Jason Dickinson, is on the second power play unit. But Colin Blackwell has 14 shots in his last 5 games. And like I said, that Islanders top line, since Christmas, 3 expected goals against per 60 minutes of 5-on-5. Their defensive numbers have been on a little bit of a slide as well. Now, whether that persists or not remains to be seen, but I don't think it's necessarily a brutal matchup for Dickinson, Blackwell, and Anderson. I would probably just one-off Colin Blackwell. It's funny the things that come out of your mouth on a 4-game slate with the Chicago Blackhawks on it. But I guess Colin Blackwell is fine as a one-off. It is the top line that I prefer. Chicago 3 has really been struggling. That Gutman-Reichel line, 120 minutes together, 1.5 expected goals, 1.5 actual goals per 60 minutes, 5-on-5. I think a Cole Gutman one-off where he gets some secondary power play time with Reichel is perfectly fine. Gutman over 2 shots per game over his last 10 games. And on the Chicago roster, just getting 2 shots feels like a miracle. So I guess if I like anything, it'd be like a one-off in the depth. It'd be like a one-off Blackwell, one-off Gutman, something like that. If I'm going to stack anything, it would be the top line. It'd be Kurashev, Radish, and Pitlick. Obviously, I like the Islander side here. The top line, as much as they struggle defensively, they're still at 3.5 expected goals per 60 minutes of 5-on-5. Matt Barzal is over 3 shots per game since Christmas. Horvat and Barzal typically play like 20 minutes a night, so that's pretty heavy ice time. Chicago is on a back-to-back. Chicago has been taking a few more penalties. Their penalty kill has been fine, but not great. So the Islanders might be able to generate something here on the power play against them, with Chicago hopefully a little bit tired. That's probably it from the Islanders side. Like, as much as I don't want to be like, Hudson Fasching on the second line instead of Pierre Engvall changes everything, it kind of changes quite a bit. Like, Josh and I talked about it, I think it was on the weekend on Saturday. Like, if there was a third assist in hockey, I'm pretty sure Pierre Engvall would be pretty high up there, because he's the guy that kind of gets the play moving, going towards the offensive zone. He's the guy that kind of digs pucks out in the offensive zone and gets it to Kyle Palmieri or gets it to the defenseman, and then that gets the play moving that eventually leads to their goals. Like without him, they're at 2.9 expected goals per 60 minutes. That is considerably lower than they have been creating with Pierre Engvall on the line. Like Brock Nelson only has 25 shots in his last 10 games. Like that's not a lot. They're skating 16, 17 minutes. Like they're not even getting 18, 19, maybe sometimes 20 minutes. The third line at Pajot, like whether it's, Pajot and Gauthier or whomever, the third line has been atrocious. So there's nothing there that I'm really interested in. I think it's Islanders 1 or bust. I do like Islanders 1 in this game. I'm just worried. I'm just a little bit worried that they're kind of falling apart a little bit. But I think I don't want to let my, let my personal feelings and what I think, get in the way here. They're not coming in with a tremendous amount of ownership. So I do like Islanders 1, but they're not like my favorite line on this slate. Like I still do like Florida 2 the best. I think Columbus second line very much in play as well. I don't mind the Detroit second line in their matchup. I think Carolina 1 certainly, or Carolina 3, certainly in a great matchup themselves. I just think that there are other spots I would rather go to than the Islanders here tonight. I'm not going to say that I'm not going to play them. I'm just kind of still thinking through my process a little bit. The issue is that they're going to go up against that Dickinson line, and that Dickinson line has been pretty good defensively. I think there's a reason why you're seeing the Islanders with a lower total, much lower than New Jersey, lower total than Florida, and Florida's playing ostensibly a much better defensive team in Minnesota. So I think that's kind of the giveaway here. If any line does explode, it is going to be the top line. But I just don't have a lot of overall interest right now. I guess we'll see what my lineups look like in about 4 hours. I'm not going to say I'm not playing the Islanders, just saying that they're not right at the top of my list at this moment. All right, those were the 4 games. Coming up a little bit later on, you have the Owner's Box live show, NFL live show with Greg Ehrenberg at 4:30 Eastern. After him, you have the NBA Deeper Dive with Eric and Ryan at 5 Eastern. And then after them, Greg is back with Matt for the NBA Live Before Lock at 6 o'clock Eastern. In net tonight, oh boy, yeah. Ilya Sorokin, 8,400 on the road. I think that's fine. Against most other teams, I would say no, but I think there's pretty good shutout equity against Chicago, so I certainly don't mind Sorokin here tonight. We have Alex Lyon projected for the most saves, but also the most goals against, which I think makes sense when you think that he's facing Carolina. Elvis Merzlikins is kind of interesting because if Columbus's penalty kill does get a lot better, that takes a big weapon away from New Jersey. So, in that mid-price range, I certainly don't mind Merzlikins here. I think it's Sergei Bobrovsky that I like best of the expensive goalies. Like, I think I'd rather play him than Sorokin here tonight. So, Sorokin, Bobrovsky, Merzlikins are the goalies that I'm really looking at. I think Alex Lyon is certainly in play here as well. Carolina does take a lot of shots. Their power play has been very good, but he's been so good. Like, you don't want to ignore, what if this is like Aiden Hill, for Vegas, where he got off to such a great start last year. I don't want to say that, a 7,300 Alex Lyon is something to avoid. Like, these are, going into Carolina on a 4-game slate, those are situations you look at. So I do like Lyon if you want to pay down in that mid-price range, probably Merzlikins. If you want to pay up, I think Bobrovsky is the answer. On defense, like Noah Dobson is kind of in a tier by himself because Jake Wallman is still out here tonight. Doubtful, I guess. Coming across Detroit information has been kind of tough here today. Like, other than him, there's nobody within. The next closest player is $1,500 cheaper. Like, Noah Dobson, I think is fine. He's been on a big goal scoring drought, but he's still been like pretty much a point per game defenseman over like his last 28 games or 29 games, 2 shots and 2 blocks per game and all that. It's just like Chicago feels like a lower paced matchup. So you're going to need him to score and get assists. No issue because there are some cheaper lines that we can play here tonight. No issue using Dobson, but he's not, right at the top of my list. Brandon Montour is the guy that I do have a lot of interest in. A big problem for him has just been getting assists at 5-on-5. That's something that I think is going to turn around. A lot of his, underlying numbers still look very strong. And like I said, he's been shooting more. So I do like Brandon Montour. Brent Burns, certainly running to the top power play for Detroit. Also want to shout out Gustav Forsling. He's had some pretty good transition and playmaking numbers himself for a defenseman. Don't mind him in the mid-price range either. Adam Bachvist, running the top power play unit for Columbus. He's been getting more minutes. He's a guy that's always been like a good transition / good playmaking defenseman. He's just been always atrocious defensively, and coaches have had a tough time trusting him because of that. But he's been played, 20, 21 minutes a game of late. So, Bachvist under that 4K mark, I think is perfectly fine. Simon Nemec is always in play for me. His ice time has been going down a little bit. But where I'm not super enthused about New Jersey's power play, I'm not as focused on Luke Hughes. So I think Nemec makes a lot of sense. Ben Sherratt has been getting more ice time with Wallman out. So Ben Sherratt, I think, makes sense in that mid-price range. And on the other side, Brett Pesce as well. Also will shout out Alex Romanov for the Islanders, playing on the top pair with Noah Dobson. If you need some punt guys, Sebastian Aho, the other Sebastian Aho, the defenseman from the Islanders, 2,500. He's been getting like 17, 18, 19 minutes for the Islanders, which against Chicago is enough to generate some value at min price. Zach Bogosian, he's been playing minutes because of the injuries. He's 2,500 as well. Don't mind him, but I think I would prefer Aho if I need to punt. Hat trick pick here tonight. I'm going with the guy that's returning, going with the guy playing against the New Jersey Devils goaltending, which is always a treat. I'm going with Captain Boone Jenner as my hat trick pick here tonight. Seth Jones. Yeah, Seth Jones is fine. He's kind of like, I guess, a cheaper Dobson on a worse team where I think you're probably going to need him to rack up goals and assists, and that's been tough to come by for Chicago. But I think the slate is pretty wide open because there are no super expensive lines that we have to play. Like the best you can do is like power play stack Florida. But other than that, like there isn't a lot of tremendously expensive stacks. So I think it does leave some defensemen the defense spot a little bit more wide open rather than pigeonholing where, last night if you're playing at 23K Tampa Bay or whatever, there are only so many guys you can choose from besides that. So I think it is wide open, but in that mid-price range, I think I just prefer, Montour or Burns or something like that. All right, that'll do it for us here today. For me here today, I guess. Josh will be back tomorrow. We will have a show tomorrow for Saturday. Please click like if you could. Please subscribe if you could. Again, I'll drop the affiliate link in our chat for anybody looking to join. Again, click through that link to join for NHL weekly, monthly. You can go any way that you want. If you want to sign up for MMA, we do have MMA Sims now. And the promo code 297 will get you 30% off your MMA package. So just click that link and help support us. And hopefully we can help you win a little bit of money along the way. Good luck tonight, everybody. We'll see you again tomorrow.